Previously on agentpalmer.com, the space race chronicled in Moonshot is nothing short of an ambitious tale. This podcast turned 2 years old, and now that how all of this came to be has come to be, who knows what'll happen next. This is the Palmer Files, episode 54, featuring Nathan Withrow, a.k.a. Bubbawheat, the creator behind the blog Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights, and podcasts Filmwhys, It's Time to Rewind, and many other projects you've either heard of or are about to hear about. We discuss writing, branding, editing, movies, superheroes, and so much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Sturzik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 54th episode is Nathan Withrow, also known as Bubbawheat, the force behind the blog Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights, and podcasts such as Filmwhys and It's Time to Rewind. Nathan, like me, is a content creator in that we both write for our blogs on a regular basis, and we both produce our own podcasts. We also have as many projects you've never heard of as the ones we do that you have, and many, many more that have never seen the light of day. We talk about his blogging origins and what he's learned watching every superhero movie you've heard of and dozens that you haven't. Plus, discuss podcasts and blogging, personal branding, how superhero movies have evolved, are trailers good or bad, and our favorite creations, and much, much more. Now, before we get going, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, my guest Nathan at Bubbawheat, that's Bubbawheat, and this show at the Palmer Files. For all things Nathan, you can visit Flights, Tights, and MovieNights.com, and you can find links to his podcast there as well, or search for them on your podcast app of choice. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. So without further ado, it's a bird. It's a plane. It's a podcast. Nathan, you and I both have blogs that turn 10 this year. So I want to just start out with this. Why did you start?
It's been so long that I don't really remember. I know, like, at the time, I was big into the MMO City of Heroes, which is basically, for those who haven't heard of it, because it has gone away along for quite a while now, but it was basically World of Warcraft with a superhero setting.
Okay.
And you could make your own superhero, and then after that, it was basically World of Warcraft, but, superheroes before DC and Marvel got their MMOs in, which I think at least one of them has already came and went as well. And so I decided that I wanted to do some sort of blogging. I had a live journal there for a while, but I wanted to do something different. Like years before, I actually ran a fan fiction site based on Japanese RPGs.
Okay. Look, I'm familiar. Up to maybe about 15, 20 years ago, like, I loved the Tales series of games and stuff like that. The original Dragon Quest.
I'm a huge Dragon Quest fan.
And then you get a job, and the amount of time that you had to play 40 hours a week while going to school with like a part-time job, like, you don't have that kind of time. And I've since tried to replay some of those games, and it's just so hard when you're like when you're playing an hour or 2 or 3 every day and you find the time, that's cool. But when you play 1 or 2 hours a week, it's like really hard to get into it. So yeah, I'm there. I'm with you. I think Dragon Quest gets underappreciated all the time.
Yeah, just a few years ago, I had like nearly an hour train commute to work every day. And so I picked up a DS and I bought the re-releases of Dragon Quest 5 and 6, which were the two that for like the Super Nintendo era that didn't make it to the US when they were originally released. And that was fun to revisit. Well, not revisit them, but to kind of revisit them for the first time.
Yeah. No, I can imagine that would make your commute, enjoyable. Like that makes, I'm looking forward to this 1 hour.
Yeah. But for the blog, yeah, I started playing City Heroes, so I wanted to do something superhero related, and somehow I came across the idea. Well, I will start this blog where I review superhero movies. And in the first year, I had it planned out. I looked up like a list of 100 superhero movies, and so in the first year, I had planned to review those 100 superhero movies. And then with the idea that it would grow from there. And now 10 years, and I did actually, accomplish that goal of reviewing 100 movies in the first year. But of course, it's slowed down quite a bit. And, I've taken a few extended hiatuses here and there through life stuff, but I keep coming back to it. And at this point, 10 years later, I'm at about 550 superhero and comic book movies that I've reviewed.
And look, I know, because I think for some reason I don't know how, right? Like it's the weird like hive mind of the internet. I've been following you for a while, and I don't know why, but I do know that like you cover like the big blockbusters, of course, but then some not so blockbustery things. Obviously there's new superhero movies coming out all the time, but are there more, I don't know, deep in the archives from like the 80s and 70s, like in like dark corners of the world where like there's still more old superhero movies for you to watch?
Yeah, there's still quite a few older obscure ones that I haven't gotten around to, because there was a big, like in the, I think, late 60s, early 70s, with the popularity of the Adam West Batman series. That's when there was this big boom with these knockoff superheroes, especially in Italy. There was a lot of Italian-based superhero movies, and I've only seen like 2 or 3 of those, and there's still a lot of those that I haven't gotten around to, because for one thing, they're harder to find, and also just that fewer people have heard of them. So I am kind of happy. Like at this point, I have covered, I think, like my tagline has switched up. The tagline that I like to use whenever somebody asks me about my site is, I've reviewed every superhero movie that you've ever heard of and dozens that you haven't.
Do you enjoy finding those off the beaten path ones? I mean, everybody can get in the argument. Like one of my best friends hates Iron Man 3, and I don't think it's a horrible film. I understand why people don't like it, but that's a modern flick, and you can take it or leave it. But do you enjoy going back and seeing like an Italian superhero movie from the 70s? Like, because it's a different, I make it a point to like go back and rewatch classics, quote unquote, because when you watch a film like The Man Who Would Be King, as an example, which is 2 hours and 15 minutes, it's over 2 hours, but the pacing is not like a Marvel movie that's over 2 hours. And I feel like you need to be in a different mindset to watch some of those older movies. The pacing's different, the story's different, like all of it's different. Do you enjoy going back there?
Oh, absolutely. Like I'm somebody that I love movies. I love the experience of watching movies, and I like to watch the movie that I watch in the headspace that I need to be in. Like there's once in a while where I don't really do any prep beforehand, but I usually go in having a rough idea of the type of movie that I'm going into. Like, I would say, I think just a couple months ago, I watched a 1980 Indian, like Bollywood Superman movie knockoff. And it was hilariously bad. And I knew I was going in, like, I knew it wasn't going to be a good movie going into it, but I had so much fun just watching this incredibly bad movie with these Bollywood-esque songs just sprinkled throughout that's just made no sense whatsoever in these bad special effects.
So I know on your site you have a top 100 superhero movies, but do you have is there a list somewhere else where it's like the top 25 bad movies you'll really like? Like is that list exist somewhere?
It's entirely possible. I do lists like that every once in a while. It's entirely possible that I have and I've forgotten about it, because there are the good bad movies and then there's the bad movies.
Yes. Yeah, no.
Because
yeah.
the one that I always like to call out is I think it was like it's not even Asylum Films, because a lot of people know the Asylum name. They're big for the mockbusters. They did like the Transmorpher movies.
Okay, yeah.
And this is like the next step below Asylum Film. I think it's Tomcat Films. And one of the ones that they released was called Captain Battle Legacy War. And it came out around the time as the first Captain America movie. And it was based on a like golden or silver age comic book that was actually called Captain Battle, and it had fallen, like nobody owned the rights, so they were actually able to use this. But it was like it's my go-to if somebody asks what's the worst movie that you've ever seen, and that is the worst movie that I have ever seen. Like they had transitions that were like page wipes that you would get in, the
like standard
Windows Movie Maker.
Yeah. Now, I don't want anyone listening to think that you're pigeonholed. Like you do other movies. Like you're not just a superhero movie buff. Like you enjoy movies too.
Yeah, in fact, like I started the movie blog in 2012, and then in like mid 2013, I started my podcast, and I called it Filmwhys, and it's the WHYS at the end stands for why haven't you seen this film? And so that was my excuse to branch out and cover more classic movies that weren't just superhero and comic book movies. And each episode I have a guest. Because it had like a very extended hiatus, but I'm in the process of coming back to it and starting to record new episodes. But each episode I would have a guest on, and they would introduce me to a classic movie or like a cult classic, like one of their favorite movies that I've never seen. And then I would turn it around and I would introduce them to a comic book or superhero movie that they haven't seen. So it'd still be tied in, but it would also give me a chance to branch out. It's like the first episode was Jaws, where I hadn't seen Jaws, and then my guest hadn't seen Superman 2: The Donner Cut.
Okay. I know that Filmwhys and the blog are just two of like a kind of like you're like a serial content creator, because like those are just two of the many things. I not to like completely jump to another topic, but like, do you enjoy creating the content, like the writing, the recording, like the editing? All of these things go into all of the things you do, and obviously it's kind of surrounded by media as like the thing that ties it all together, but you're always creating something.
Yeah, I love having a creative outlet. whatever that is. Like I mentioned, I started with fan fiction, where I wrote fan fiction, and then it moved to movie criticism, and now it's a combination of the movie criticism, and I do occasional blogging, and then the podcasts with the movies, and then I also have an outlet for visual creativity, because for each Filmwhys episode, I mash up the two posters for the episode artwork for each episode.
So,
and that's like, this visual creative outlet that I get to do, which I love doing that. And I also mash up the trailer because I like the editing. Like I'm one of the few podcasters who enjoys editing.
I enjoy the editing process. I'll admit that. I'm with you. If one of the reason people hate editing is because they don't like listening to their own voice, but I feel like the other part is hi, I'm Jason. I'm a podcaster, and I enjoy Monday Morning Quarterback, which is exactly what editing is to me. Like, I get to tell the story, but I also get to be like, why'd you ask that question? Or like, oh, you forgot to ask that follow-up. Or like, you have an anecdote. Why did you stay silent? Like, I enjoy that part of it, and I feel like it's how you get better. Like, if I outsourced the editing, I wouldn't know I missed that question. I wouldn't know that, not that I stuttered there, but like, you tripped over your words right there. Like, that part of it really intrigues me.
Do I really say that many times?
Yeah. I mean, I have started editing for other people, and I feel like it's easier to pick up on other people's crutches before I pick up on mine. Now, it could be that I've heard it and I'm trying to actively go at it, but like, there's a guy whose thing I'm working on, and it's, they go in and out of clips, and it's always, okay, so that's it. There's no other verbal transition. It's okay, so, or wow. Those are the two. Wow. Great thing. Wow. Great. All right. There are other exclamations. All right. So before the fanfic and that was part of the live journal is my assumption.
No, it was part of an AOL site.
I mean, were you always a writer? I guess what I'm getting at is, were you always a creator? Obviously the blog comes along and you had the live journal before that, but like, were you always doing stuff?
Yeah. I mean, the initial, like the fanfic website, that would be like not too long after we got internet, back whenever I was in like high school.
Okay.
Like my last few years of high school. And that was kind of it was a little bit of creating, but it was also curating, because I would collect other people's fanfics and collect them and post them on my site. It was called The Hole in the Universe, although it was WHOLE, because that's clever.
I like it. I still it's one of the reasons I like Filmwhys. I feel like it works. Like, I'm a sucker for alliteration and rhyme. So, fights, tights, and movie nights, like, you're just the branding on your blog alone speaks to me, right? Like, I can't deny that attraction.
Yeah, that's something that I always love, and it does tend to take me a long time to figure out. Like, Filmwhys took me forever, and I'm also the type of person where, like, whenever I think of a name, I immediately Google, okay, has anybody else thought of this yet?
Look at, especially now, like, is the Twitter available? Look at it. Does somebody have a podcast called that already? There are so many things to check now for a name.
I mean, that's even going with my name. My name's Nathan Withrow, and there aren't a whole lot of famous Nathans. There's like Nathan Fillion, and that's about it. But in terms of my online name, which is Bubbawheat, I also had created that whenever I was in high school. And there's still pretty much not any other Bubbawheat out there. It's still as original now as it was whenever I first created that. And that kind of blows my mind. That like the only time I've ever not gotten Bubbawheat is there is this one guy, and I think it's his nickname, but his nickname is Bubba, and his last name is actually Wheat. And there's been a couple times where I'm pretty sure it's this guy, like on Facebook, he's under Bubbawheat, and I think that he got the Gmail. And then there's just been a couple other places where I couldn't get Bubbawheat, but like 99 times out of 100, any new social network, any new thing, username Bubbawheat, it's available.
Yeah, I think if I had actually done more research on Agent Palmer, I might have reconsidered, because there's an NCIS character that I battle with for the top Google spot. And I feel like when that show finally goes off the air, I might actually regain my thing. There's like a wiki. So as long as that character is around in that show, in syndication, I sometimes lose my top spot. But otherwise, I'm doing okay, except for the poor realtor who's got Agent Palmer at Gmail, because I have the Agent Palmer at Gmail. And I sent an email once to them, and I was like, I'm sorry if you get anything from the people that hear me talk on the internet, because they forgot the article. And I never heard anything, and I was being sincere, like I wasn't trying to troll or anything. So, but I never heard back. So, and I've already, I'm used to my, like now, if you took away the article, I'd be like, I don't remember what no, leave the article alone, man. So let me ask, writing the blog versus creating the podcast in all of its various forms, do you have a preferred format?
No, I don't really have a preferred format, because I think that they both have their pros and cons. I'm somebody that I'm kind of like with a lot of people that don't like listening to their own voice, because and I think maybe I do actually prefer writing, because a lot of times I feel like the ideas in my head, and getting those ideas to words and having them come out of my mouth takes longer than it does for other people. But whenever I'm writing, it seems to come out faster, or it comes out in spurts. And sometimes, and for some people listening to that and me listening to myself, a lot of times I hear that, and I can hear my ideas coming out in spurts, and I hear that in my voice and how I speak. And occasionally that annoys me a bit, especially whenever I'm editing. But whenever it's in writing, you don't see that, because it's all just there.
Yeah, the polished product of a blog post is so much more, I don't want to use the word perfect, because I feel like we all still have our things that, our arguments that were like perfect to us, but then you read it like a week later and you're like, oh, I hit publish on this, but I agree with you. I feel like there's I think maybe there's a little bit more control over the written word, versus the here and now. Like whatever I'm saying to you right now is what I'm saying to you, and I can either cut it out in the edit, or leave it in, and I don't really have much choice. I can't make myself sound more eloquent or like go after the alliteration for something. Whereas if I'm writing it, like I have a first draft, and then I have a second draft where I can change words around. Then I have a third draft if I wanted to. Yeah, and then I can send it to somebody else, and they like there's so much more control over the written word. But I feel like we're dinosaurs. And I don't say that like in a bad way. I just, everybody I talk to wants to know about podcasting. And I always tell them, well, you know, a blog might be more doable for you. It's a balance. I feel like you have jumped around. I know some of your shows are on hiatus. They're not like all running concurrently, but like you do keep creating them. It feels like. Do you have a list somewhere of more that have yet to be created?
No, right now I'm pretty much just focused on three things. I've got the written blog where I'm reviewing superhero movies. Mostly I'm catching up on the ones from just the past year or so, which I think I've covered all the major ones. And like now at the time that we're recording, I'm going back and catching up on like the DC animated features because they kept coming out with those and I fell behind. I'm like 6 behind on that. And that's only after like, I feel like just 6 months, but I think it's been longer than that. And then I have the Filmwhys, which has been on an extended hiatus. And then I switched hosting services because the one that I was in before, you know, the free version was extremely limited. And I'm still in a position where this is a hobby and I make, you know, maybe $100 a year in ads if I'm lucky. That comes out in one big chunk.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to build a Patreon, but that's still like extremely minimal. And then I just use that. I would use that to, you know, rent the movies and go to the theaters. But the free hosting that I was using was extremely limited. I could only host like 8 episodes at a time. And then I found out about Anchor.fm. And this seems like it's really the first totally free podcast hosting service, which for a long time, it blew my mind that nobody could figure out how to have a free audio hosting service because YouTube exists and video takes up so much more storage and bandwidth than audio. And yet YouTube is free, but all the podcasts cost money.
Yeah. No, you say that now and it's like, yeah, we did skip a step. It's kind of weird. I want to get back to your third one, but it is kind of weird that like audio is having this resurgence when we did kind of go from the written word to video on the internet, you know, as far as the internet's concerned. Mm-hmm. And now we're going back to audio, which feels so, let's be honest, 18th century, right? Like this is radio on demand. Like,
yeah.
All right. So the third one, back to,
so I'm re-releasing, I've got, you know, 85 episodes of Filmwhys that I've been releasing on a daily basis. And I'm recording number 86 this weekend. And so whenever I get finished the old episodes, I'll have a new one to come out the very next day.
And is that going to be weekly or monthly or?
I haven't decided at this point because the third one that I'm doing, which I just started a couple months ago, it's called It's Time to Rewind, and it's based on time loop movies and TV shows. And I got inspired by the movies by minutes format, which is kind of a growing movie podcast format that takes a movie and each episode they cover a single minute of a movie, or sometimes they'll do 5 minutes. And mine, I do that with a time loop story, and each episode is one loop of the story. Okay. And I started out with Groundhog Day because of course
I mean, look, it's funny too, because was it 2019, 2020, Hulu and Amazon within like 2 weeks of each other had those two time loop romances. One was Palm Springs, and the other was the map of tiny things or tiny perfect things.
The map of tiny perfect things.
And I did eventually watch them, like not when they first came out, but I did eventually watch them and went like, these are both really good. They're both very different, still similar, very different. But why did?
And also, Russian Doll was not that long ago either.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. I just kept thinking like, is this a? Were these close enough to be sisters, like Armageddon and Deep Impact, right? Like, was there something in the water that people were like, you know what, we need a time loop with romance again? It's back. Who knows? But how have you enjoyed? Because obviously it's an adaptation of the, taking a minute of film and podcasting about it. How have you enjoyed the loops in depth? Because obviously, I think everybody's watched Groundhog Day for the most part, probably a few times, because it feels like one of those quote unquote syndicated movies.
Yeah.
But you've probably watched more of it in detail where you are in the show so far, the podcast so far. Do you have are you sick of it yet? Is there an appreciation? Like, I mean, I know you're only doing chunks, but still, like, you're living with that movie.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating to dissect a movie this way. And I'm, this is just the first movie I've done. And, there's a chance I might get tired of it, especially if I cover, the less movies that are much less than Groundhog Day. But with this one, it's really been fascinating, and just the way that I've been able to do it, and especially starting with Groundhog Day, because there is so much detail packed into each scene in that movie. Like, and whenever they're at the Tip Top Diner, the Tip Top Cafe, just practically everybody in the background is somebody that comes back in the movie later, but they've always been in the background. And just to watch, a 4-minute scene in the diner early in the movie over and over and over again, and to catch these little details that most people wouldn't notice if they're just watching the movie start to finish, because they're focusing on what the filmmaker wants you to focus on.
Has it changed the way you've watched? Like, I mean, obviously, since you've undertaken this, has it changed the way you've watched just other films?
A little bit. At least I think so. I think it has made me look for details a little bit more. Like, just a couple days ago, I watched Spawn, because that's going to be the episode that's new to my guest in the Filmwhys that I'm recording this weekend. And it's an okay movie. I have fun with it, but there was definitely a lot of details that I noticed that I hadn't noticed before. Like, early in the movie, you see Wanda, which is Spawn's wife, at the beginning, and she's pulling out in her car, and she has an air freshener, and it's the evil clown. And this is before the evil clown has been introduced in the movie yet.
Okay. Yeah.
But they have that detail. And there were a couple other details, like there's a motorcycle chase, and I noticed that the stuntman looked like he got hit with a chunk of fence. That's the truck, hit a fence and then knocked it into the stunt guy driving the motorcycle. And then I looked into the IMDb trivia afterwards, and that was I noticed 3 things, and they were all there in the IMDb trivia.
I mean, you feel like you win right there. Like, that feels like it's not a game, but you feel like you get some extra points for that because you noticed it without looking it up.
Yeah.
Have you are there movies that you've heard of in the cultural whatever that you're like, well, I hope somebody brings this to Filmwhys? Like, do you have a list somewhere of movies you haven't seen but you don't want to watch it? Because look, as a content creator, right? We always have those things that we're like, Well, that could be a thing. Like, I remember probably 3 years. It's been a while. It's been over a couple years, I think. But I had never seen The Matrix start to finish. And Bill Sweeney needed an episode for something. And that's what we did. It was my first watch all the way through of The Matrix. And we went through it. And, at a certain point, you go, I can watch that. And then you're like, I'll save it. Like, I'll just save it. Like, do you have a list?
Yeah, I have a list. It's about 100 movies long,
Of
a little
course.
over 100 movies long. And this actually did come up just fairly recently within the past couple of weeks. My wife got because, the new Space Jam movie came out recently. And she was like, I haven't seen Space Jam since I was a kid. And I was like, yeah, I've got Space Jam on my Filmwhys list because I've never seen it before. And I think that would be a fun Filmwhys episode to discuss it. And she's like, well, I rented it. I got it from the library. Let's watch it. And so, like, part of me was like, I don't know. Do I want to watch it just to watch it, or do I want to watch it for a podcast episode?
Yeah. No.
But we did end up watching it, and it was exactly what I thought it was going to be, which was mostly bad with a few fun bits, but it was interesting and entertaining to watch.
Okay, so I know, as a follower of yours on Twitter, you live tweet a lot of the movies you watch.
Yeah, it varies. I tend to live tweet more for the one thing for the bad movies, and also movies that I've seen before, like Spawn. Like, whenever I watch Spawn, I live tweeted the hell out of that because it's not the best movie, and there's a lot to talk about. And I've seen it a couple times before.
Does it help you with notes? Like, when you're watching it, like, is that your form of note taking? Like, I'll just go back and check the Twitter feed later because it's all there.
Yeah, I've definitely used my live tweeting as my notes, because I don't, at least for Filmwhys, I never took notes. For It's Time to Rewind, I had a lot more detailed notes because it was a different style of podcasting, because Filmwhys, it's all about first impressions and like gut reactions. This is how I felt about the movie, seeing it for the first time. And this is just, fresh. This is just, like 20 minutes for an entire movie, typically 20 to 25 minutes. And then for It's Time to Rewind, we could talk, like I stretched a 1 second clip from a slap montage into like a 15-minute episode. And like I think the most, another one, like him getting hit by a truck, was like a 30-minute episode.
Okay. Like, so I guess for context then, if you're going to write about something for the blog, you watch it once, you watch it twice. Like, what's the...
For the blog, I typically I watch it once. It's also, my blog reviews do tend to be a bit more stream of consciousness, gut reaction reviews. Sometimes I will do a little research for fact checking and things like that, make sure that I spell somebody's name right. Occasionally I'll do like a deep dive, I would say. And once in a while I'll do like an in-depth article. Like, my favorite article that I have ever done, which was, many years ago now, but it was about fan films getting struck by copyright infringement and taken down. And it was, basically a deep dive into the history of fan films and ones that have gotten taken down for copyright infringement. And
was this when the Star Trek ones kept getting, because I remember a few years ago, I don't know what it was, but a few years ago, like, there were like probably 2 or 3 like Star Trek fan films that just kept getting like whacked by CBS.
I'm not sure if this was around that time. I want to say it was like maybe 2014, 2015. And I know that there was I think it was a Punisher fan film that actually like got shut down before they even officially released it. And there was also uh, like a Dark Knight inspired fan film that was on Kickstarter. Like they did a short film and they did a Kickstarter to turn it into a series, and that got shut down. But they didn't tell them to take down the short film, but they told them to stop the Kickstarter and they couldn't do the series.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like weird lines.
See, you mentioned that, and now I'm trying to think of like, do I have a favorite post? Like I don't. There are definitely posts I've done. Like I think I'm with you in that whatever my favorite post would potentially be, it's one of the deep dives I've done. I did a deep dive in the history of coffee, and that was pretty, like, that was just fun to get lost in, I'll be honest. Then there was the deep dive I did on DEEK, which I don't remember what it stands for anymore, but it was DIC. It was the children's network that did like Inspector Gadget and stuff. And it really, that one just came to me as like, well, they did so many cartoons I used to watch as a kid. Like, whatever happened to them? And like, it's just this fun, weird, like rabbit hole of going down things. So I don't know if I have favorites so much as it's just like the ones that take the most time and that you spend that much time in researching are the ones that I feel like I look back fondly as like, well, that was like an Everest I climbed right there. Like I did, it's not like watching a movie once, maybe twice, and writing about it. In my case, like it's more than that. But what about podcasts? Like, do you have some favorite of those that it's like, well, it was the discussion that like, I didn't expect that discussion from that particular movie.
Yeah, and I think that like my favorite podcast follows with my favorite blog post. It was one that I did put a lot of time into. Like I probably spent 10 hours crafting a 30-minute episode, because it was something that I started doing. I only did 3 episodes. It was a spinoff of Filmwhys. I called it Filmwhys Spotlight. What I did was I got people who were fans of lesser known and typically lesser enjoyed superhero and comic book films, and I had them talk about what they loved about it. And then I cut that up. Like I think I talked to about 3 different people for each movie. I did one on Supergirl, one on Ang Lee's Hulk, and then I did one on Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which that one's probably the film that people who have seen it generally love it, but it's still kind of underseen.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who have just never. I wonder what was happening in the world, like, because I saw it, but like I know plenty of people that they're like, nah, I never saw it.
And also on the Ang Lee episode, I actually was able to talk to one of the writers of the early drafts of that film, and he was like incredibly candid and open about everything. And then it was kind of funny. I mean, maybe funny is the wrong word, but at the end of it, I was like, okay, I can. So like I told him what I was doing with it, and he didn't realize that I was recording the whole thing. He thought that I was like, I don't know, transcribing it, or I was going to use it for like a written interview or something like that. And like I assured him, no, don't worry. And because he named names.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he's like, and I was like, no, don't worry. I'm not, like, anytime that you name, I'm not going to put that in there. So, but that specific one was interesting. And then, I chopped up the 3 separate interviews so they all flowed together, and I included brief clips from the movies. And like it was a process, and like I took probably 45 minutes to an hour with each person, and I cut it down to like a 30 to 40 minute episode.
So before all of this, do you have any audio editing experience or any audio experience on mic at all?
No. Like me starting out with the blog, I, like most people who have a blog, they search out ways to increase their traffic. And so I found a site called The Lamb, a large association of movie blogs. And that kind of brought me into a film blogging community. And they also have a podcast called The Lambcast, where they open it up to members of The Lamb, which any movie blog or movie podcast can join The Lamb, and it's still running. It's at this point, I think they have over 2,000 members. Of course, a lot of those are members who have since gone dark and quit blogging and podcasting, but there's still a lot of people that are active. And I started just by joining that community, and then the host at the time asked me, like, I joined their forum, and then I gave the podcast a shot, and I joined on a guest. I think it was for The Dark Knight, or The Dark Knight Rises, whenever that movie first came out, which was in 2012. So that was like in the first year of my blog.
Yeah. I ask because I did have a small background in radio before this. Not necessarily editing. I mean, I feel like unless you're in audio production, you're never going to have that experience. Like, that's something you just pick up. And when it comes to writing, I mean, everybody's had to write book reports and stuff. Like, it's not like, and I don't want to belittle what we do, but like, if you've ever written a book report, you can write a movie review. Like, we're not writing the great American novel. And so there's a commonality that everybody has. It's just we still enjoy writing. But I feel like I got on a kick. It just so happened that, like, talking about, like, oh, people need to get out and do stuff. Like, everybody needs to go out and do their thing. And I feel like I never say, you don't need to know what the hell you're doing. Like, if you want to do it, just do it. Like, you'll fall into it. It'll just happen. 'Cause if you don't like it, you'll change it. Like, you wouldn't still be reviewing superhero movies if you didn't like it. Like, at a certain point, like, it's 10 years now. Like, you're not doing this begrudgingly. Like, crap, yeah. Another movie. Like, that's not a thing that you're gonna
like,
do.
Oh darn, I gotta go see Suicide Squad.
Again? Didn't I just do this a few years ago? Look, I did want to ask. I mean, obviously, you started the blog a decade ago, which is a few years after Iron Man kicks off a brand new era in superhero films, basically. How has the genre changed? Like, I feel like I can ask you because you've been paying a little bit closer attention, because I have watched all of them, but I haven't written about all of them. Some of them I've only watched once, or maybe I've missed. But, like, clearly we have turned a corner where the genre movie is not a bad word anymore.
Yeah, and I'm actually, I'm curious because I've early in the first few years of doing this, I was clearly able to basically divide the history of superhero cinema into basically 4 different eras. And I think that there has been a shift in the 10 years, but I haven't figured out like where that dividing line is, because it's basically at the time, I like to say there were 4 movies that changed the way that superhero movies were made. The first one was Christopher Reeve's Superman, the movie.
Okay.
The next one would be Tim Burton's Batman.
All right.
Because that started shifting it to, that made superhero movies a bit more viable, and it started making them darker at the time.
Yep.
The next one would be X-Men in the 2000s, and that shift made superheroes more tied to the real world, to where the superheroes were actual human characters
Yeah.
that had personalities, and they weren't just these fantastic comic book characters. That they weren't fully caricatures.
Yeah. Okay. And then the dividing line becomes a little blurry because you're either a DC fan and you say The Dark Knight, or you're a Marvel fan and you say Iron Man. Is that?
Well, I would say the Avengers.
Okay.
That's because the Avengers, I think at the time, was really the movie that changed the way that movies were made, because it showed that you could make superheroes into a franchise. You could make them connected, build upon each other, and then come out with the Avengers, which is bigger than the sum of its parts.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Because it's, if you use Avengers as that film, DC's still looking for theirs. Like, and I'm not picking on them. I feel like it's not any fault of any creative piece. But Marvel set out to create the Avengers. And DC did not. And they kind of went to retroactively do it, which has been to their folly. I feel like all the movies would have been better had they just gone on and not tried to connect it all.
And actually, just kind of thinking about it as you said it, I think the next one would actually probably be Deadpool, because Deadpool was a success, and because X-Men was starting the shift. It doesn't have to be 100% comic book accurate. We're going to put these in leather because that's instead of the flashy comic book outfits. And then Deadpool was like, no, let's make it exactly like the comic book.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because Wolverine, up to that point, Wolverine's not wearing blue and yellow.
Right. We've never seen Wolverine in a comics accurate costume.
Yeah.
We've only seen the hint of one in a deleted scene.
Yeah, okay. And and Deadpool's got a few other things going for it too. Like it's the rated R that was supposed to be
the hard R too.
Yeah, the hard R, and it was never supposed to work, right? Like it was just this is going to work for what? You're cutting your audience in half. You can't have all those kids watching it, and it's like.
And then it became the biggest R-rated movie ever.
Yeah, yeah.
And if Deadpool wasn't a success, we wouldn't have gotten James Gunn's Suicide Squad. Okay.
Yeah. We would. Yeah. I wonder, because do you follow all of the insider trading, like the industry news, or do you try and stay with the here and now, I guess?
Yeah, that's something that I've never enjoyed. A lot of times I felt like I would be able to increase my readership tenfold if I added like a news element to my blog, but that's something that I've always railed against, just because I wouldn't enjoy it, because I don't like all the speculative sites that as we're recording this, the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer just dropped.
Yeah.
And there's already dozens of sites reporting on it and like breaking it down into minute detail. And it's like they figured out already that they're pretty sure that the lizard is in it, but it's voiced by the guy who played the lizard, who played Dr. Connors in Spider-Man 2 and 3, in Raimi's Spider-Man 2 and 3.
Yeah, I watched the trailer today, actually, begrudgingly, right? I for movies I know I'm going to watch, I very much try to go in as as dumb as possible, right? Because I've treated books the same way. And then I finish a book and I go look at the back cover because I want to write a spoiler-free review, and I go, that's on the back cover? Like that was a great turn for somebody who had no idea it was coming. Like, I understand that it sells the book, right? Because it's like, ooh, but guess what happens? But if you don't have any idea what's going on, like, it's such a turn. And I just feel like you can't go back and re-experience something for the first time. So, like, if I tell you, if the secret is that Peter Parker's Spider-Man, but you don't know that going in, that's something that you get to experience and enjoy the first time you figure it out watching, right? Versus knowing it going in and you're like, well, okay.
But I've been someone that I have never really cared. Well, I don't say never, because I was annoyed at the time that I had The Sixth Sense spoiled for me before seeing it for the first time. But nowadays, I don't really care about spoilers at all. Like, I don't I'm not a spoiler hunter wanting to know everything about the movie before I go into it. But if a movie or show gets spoiled for me, then it's like, oh, that's interesting. And then I move on with my life. Because if you think about it, and I think James Gunn mentioned this with the Suicide Squad, and like in a slightly related way, is that you only see a movie or experience a story for the first time once, but you enjoy the movie more whenever you're familiar with it. Like, there's reasons that we keep coming back to movies and TV shows over and over again that we're familiar with, because that familiarity breeds enjoyment. And they have actually done studies where they did like EKGs, and they basically were measuring a person's enjoyment. It was either through EKGs, or it might have just been through like scoring rating. And they had people rate their enjoyment of something going into it for the first time, and other people who had been spoiled by a big twist. And the people who had been spoiled ahead of time actually enjoyed the story more than those who hadn't and were experiencing it for the first time.
Well, I'm going to have to rethink how I feel about trailers. Yeah, all right. Well, I'm going to have to figure out where that puts me now, because now I'm going to have to think about it. I'm not going to be so anti-trailer anymore then, because you do only experience, whether, the experience isn't just the plot, right? And I feel like that's something that, the turn, the twist, the end, that's not all of it, especially as movies get longer. That twist and that end might only be 18 minutes. The other 2 hours, I really hope you're enjoying that part of the film too.
Yeah, and also, like, if you know the big twist ahead of time, like you're watching a movie for the second, third, or 25th time, you do enjoy the setup. Like, there's, like, with comedies that I've seen a dozen times, but I still love, I will start watching and I will start laughing at a joke with the setup. Like, yeah, because I know the punchline already.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I am going to put you on the spot with this question. Like, what is one or two or three movies that, not exact, but like, what are the movies you've seen like the most? Like, what are your most rewatchable, like, comfort films?
Well, my number one is definitely The Princess Bride.
Okay.
I've seen that many times, and I just recently rewatched it not that long ago. After that, it becomes a little bit harder, just because I'm not a huge rewatcher. That, like, there are a few movies, I want to go back to And maybe the two movies that I would like watch every year for a while, and that would be like The Crow, which I've for a while I was watching that every Devil's Night, the night before Halloween.
Yep.
And the other one, which is right around the same time of year, is the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think television has tweaked my answer. Like my number one is still and probably will be for a very long time Real Genius. Like that, and that's very rarely on television, but that's near the top of my list. But then after that, it gets to be like the syndication ones where it's like Twister. Like if Twister's on, I'll watch it. I can't not. Fifth Element, same way. If Fifth Element's on, I can't not watch. And those two are always on, especially in the summer. Twister's on every channel. Twister's on every channel. It's on. If you have cable, you can find Twister during the summer. Period. The end. And then there's like other films that I just, but those are the ones for me. I just.
Yeah, it's tougher for me because I cut the cable cord a long time ago, so I'm 100% on demand. I have a collection of.
Do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy the fact that everything you watch is on demand? Like, so you have to make the conscious effort. Like, I'm gonna hit play on this. Do you enjoy that, or is there a part of you that misses the well, it's 30 minutes into Twister, I guess I'll watch this now? Do you miss that part at all?
A little bit, but I think that streaming does make up for it to a certain extent with their algorithms and their suggested content. So it's like the suggested content is like what's on
next,
what would be on cable, but you can start it immediately. Like you don't have to wait for it. You never miss the first half hour. You always start from the beginning.
I think that it's important to reiterate what the purpose of editing is, since you've just heard two people who both enjoy editing talk about it. Edit is, according to Merriam-Webster, a verb that means to prepare something for publication or public presentation, or to assemble by cutting and rearranging, or to alter, adapt, or refine, especially to bring about conformity to a standard or to suit a particular purpose. With all that official stuff out of the way, for me, editing is two things: correction and simplification. For the blog, that means checking spelling, grammar, and communicating my thoughts clearly. For the podcast, it's trimming the fat while keeping the conversation natural. That's what it means to me, but it could mean other things to other people, yet it still remains similar. However, the process of editing has gotten a bad rap by some people. Some creators out there hate editing, and they're going at it all wrong and need to come over from the dark side to those of us who embrace editing. Why don't you like editing? I don't know, but I can tell you why you'll like it. You'll like editing because it makes your thing better. Editing leads to revision, and revision leads to improvement, and more importantly, learning. Learning can lead to a better first draft, which leads to a better finished product, even though there's still editing that happens after that. Editing is not censorship, but it's an important part of being better understood by and respecting your audience. You shouldn't have to untangle 3 run-on sentences because they fell out of my head. It could happen, but optimally, I have an editor who will untangle them so you don't have to. Sometimes that editor is me, and other times it's someone pushing me to be better. Either way, I understand it is such an important part of the creation process, and you should too. So, do you like editing? And if not, how can I help you see the light? Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 54. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Agent Palmer, my guest Nathan at Bubbawheat, that's Bubbawheat, and this show at The Palmer Files. For all things Nathan, you can visit flights, tights, and movienights.com, and you can find links to his podcast there, as well as search for them on the podcast app of your choice. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. Nathan, do you have one final question for me?
Yeah, this is something that I ask everybody that I interview, whether it's for my blog or my Filmwhys podcast, and it shouldn't be a huge surprise for you knowing where I come from, but I always like to ask, what's your favorite superhero movie? Like superhero, or you can go comic book movie.
So, my gut reaction is Iron Man, because I think it hit me at the right time. Like I was having my quarter life crisis when that movie came out, it was just I think it just hit. The writing of it hit me at the right time, wanting to do something bigger, wanting to do something better. I mean, at the time I was a college graduate working retail, and it was just like, I don't want to be doing retail for the rest of my life. Like, nothing against people who work in retail, but it's just, I didn't go to school for this. I want to do something more. And I wasn't. And 2008 also happens to coincide with, that's when I started my own business, which was kind of in motion before Iron Man comes out that summer, but I don't launch the business until the fall. So maybe there's a little like, get off your ass, dude. But I don't know, it hit me at the right place at the right time. I mean, I was a fan of Burton's Batman, and I was a fan of the X-Men and the Spider-Man stuff. Like, it's not like it was the only one, right? But when it came out, it hit me at such the right place. It was the right character for me, personally, right? It was the right character. It was the right kind of movie. It was the right tone, that balance of, like, serious and still throw in the proper amount of laughter, but not make it a comedy. Which is kind of the Marvel way, nowadays. It's something that's, a lot of times I will rail against the fact that I don't like the term superhero genre. It's like, animation isn't a genre. You can have adult animation. Yeah, no, I hear that. Yeah.
And I kind of feel the same way with superheroes, but in a lot of ways Marvel has kind of made its own genre. Marvel is a genre, because all their shows and movies more or less follow a similar format with some variations.
So I would love to tell you, because if we think about the tonnage, the sheer amount of superhero movies that have happened after Iron Man, it's kind of weird for me to be like, because I will be the first to admit, it's not even like the best Marvel movie. I don't even know what I would say that is, but I know Iron Man's great, but it's not a perfect film. But to me, like, it still hits me in all the right places. And so that's got to be my answer. Like, I want to say others. Like, I want to, because there are other films I may like better, but like that one just hit me at the right time, and it still does. It still hits me in the right places every time.
Yeah, I would still have that one like in my top 10. Like, I haven't done a top 10 in a few years, and so it's probably will have changed because there's been a lot of good movies in the past 2 or 3 years. But I wouldn't be surprised if Iron Man was still in my top 10 superhero movies.
Yeah, I think in 15, 20, 30 years when we look back, like, people will genuinely ask how did they get so lucky to do it that, because here's the thing, we talk about Marvel as a genre, and it starts there, and there's not much difference. Like, the writing's changed, the characters have changed, but the amount of like plot and story with a sprinkle of drama and comedy, it's all there. Like, the recipe exists in 2008 for Iron Man that they have seen through, that when you watch the next film, when we watch Spider-Man, when it comes out, like, that formula still exists. Like, they got so... clearly they got lucky, because you don't know that that's going to be the form. Like, you just don't know. Like, this is the movie we're making today in 2008. Like, holy crap, it's still a viable thing. And
on top of that, at the time, people forget Iron Man was like a C-list superhero.
Yeah. He's Robert Downey Jr. has 100% transformed that character into an A-lister.
Yeah.